If you've ever wondered about the secrets buried deep within the ocean-sunken ships, lost sailors, and wandering spirits, then listen closely. Tonight, we bring you true paranormal encounters on haunted ships, told by the crew who survived the unimaginable. This is not fiction. This is reality. As the Sea Guardian entered the final phase of its mission, a quiet tension began settling over the ship, an unease that no one understood but everyone felt. What had begun as a routine maritime security route had turned into something far darker. At first, the crew chalked it up to fatigue, long nights, the monotony of watching endless waves, and listening to the same groans of steel and wind. But soon, small cracks in their composure began to show. No one could sleep. No one felt hungry. Conversations dwindled until most of the men kept to themselves. Even laughter, a sailor's greatest cure, had vanished entirely. The change was subtle, but the kind of subtle that eats away at sanity quietly, steadily, like rust spreading beneath fresh paint. Within days, it became clear that something was wrong with all of them, and yet, no one could point to a reason. The first sign came not from a person, but from the ship itself. Engineers reported instruments flickering, showing readings that made no sense. Sudden temperature drops in sealed compartments, pressure spikes for no identifiable cause, and a strange interference that disrupted internal comms every night at roughly the same time. At 2:13, like clockwork, static would ripple through the system. At first, the crew dismissed it as a wiring fault, but when an engineer tried to trace the interference, his equipment registered the source as coming from inside one of the sealed ballast tanks, an area no one had accessed for months. When they opened the tank, it was bone dry. The interference, however, did not stop. The nights grew stranger. Some crew members began complaining of footsteps on the deck, long after everyone should have been asleep. Others swore they heard someone whispering their name as they walked down the corridors. A few claimed to see someone standing at the far end of the hall, someone who was gone when they approached. The human mind might play tricks, but it does not play them consistently, and it does not make several men experience the same illusions at the same time. Rumors spread quietly. Some said the ship had sailed into a cursed stretch of water. Others insisted it was just exhaustion. But the Sea Guardian continued to move through the waves like a man walking deeper into a forest he does not know is hunting him. One night, while I was on watch duty, leaning against the cold railing and staring into the dark sea, I experienced something I still struggle to explain. The water, which had been calm, suddenly took on an unnatural darkness as though someone had poured ink across miles of ocean. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but the darkness remained. It wasn't nightfall or shadows. It felt like a presence rising from below. I leaned forward, trying to understand what I was seeing, when the surface of the water broke, not with a splash, but with a tearing sound, like fabric ripping underwater. A hand emerged. It was swollen, pale, and wrinkled, like it had been submerged for years. The nails were cracked, the skin grayish-blue. Before I could react, a face rose behind the hand. The same face I had glimpsed once before, days earlier, when I thought exhaustion was making me hallucinate. But now it wasn't a fleeting image. It was right there in front of me, the eyes staring directly into mine. They were lifeless, hollow, but intent, as though whatever it was, it recognized me. I tried to step back, but my legs refused to respond. It felt like the cold was reaching through the railing into my bones, freezing me in place. More of its body surfaced. The torn uniform clung to its corpse-like frame. A rusted badge hung from its chest. The water did not drip from its face. It clung to it like oil, thick and unmoving. My breath caught in my throat. There was no doubt this was no hallucination. My heart pounded so violently I could feel my pulse in my ears. I wanted to scream, but not a sound escaped me. And then, behind it, something else began rising. A second shadow, then a third. Then dozens. They emerged slowly, like soldiers marching upward from the grave. Hollow faces, distorted by water and time. Their features were twisted in a frozen mix of agony and silence. Their uniforms, old decayed, looked like they belonged to forgotten naval missions decades past. Some of their limbs were bent in ways no living person could survive. Their eyes, all of them, were fixed on the Sea Guardian. At that exact moment, the ship's alarm blared. Not triggered by anyone. It activated on its own. The sound vibrated through the steel deck, echoing like a warning cry. Some swore later that the alarm didn't just sound mechanical, it sounded like a scream from the ship itself. Crew members poured onto the deck, some half asleep, some terrified, some clutching tools or anything they could use as a weapon, though they knew nothing physical was approaching them. The sea around the ship seemed to pulse, not with waves, but with intent. The figures in the water drifted closer, not swimming, not walking, just gliding. Their bodies half submerged, as if the sea itself carried them upward. Some men panicked. One started praying loudly, another froze and began shaking uncontrollably. A few backed away, pressing against the walls of the deck, as though pushing themselves into the steel would somehow save them. And then there were those who did something far worse. They stepped toward the railing, drawn to the figures, like something was calling them. One man, eyes glazed, walked straight toward the edge. Another followed like a sleepwalker. The captain's voice cut through the chaos. "Back away. They want to pull you under." But his shout vanished into the wind before reaching anyone. No one seemed to hear him. The ship groaned, as if under strain from some unseen force. The metal vibrated beneath our boots. The air temperature dropped so sharply that condensation formed on our breath despite the warm night. The Sea Guardian tilted sharply to one side. Men fell onto the deck. Gear tumbled. A toolbox slid across the floor and nearly took someone's legs out from under him. The figure stopped at the ship's edge. The one I saw first, the one whose eyes had locked onto mine, held my gaze even now. Its mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Yet, somehow, I felt the message. Not heard, but felt. A pull, an invitation, or a warning. And then, just as suddenly as they had risen, the shadows began sinking back down, one by one, disappearing beneath the surface without a single ripple. But that face, the one that found me, its hand reached up one last time before the sea swallowed it whole. The expression in its eyes was not anger. It was pleading, as if asking for something it could not say, and perhaps something it knew I could not give. By dawn, the ocean looked calm again, too calm, as though nothing had happened. But the Sea Guardian told a different story. A thick crust of salt coated the deck, far thicker than any natural accumulation. It clung to every surface like frost. Some said it smelled like old seawater mixed with decay. Others avoided touching it altogether. It took us an entire day to wash the deck clean. But even after rinsing and scrubbing, the scent lingered faintly, as though embedded in the steel. The captain documented the incident with clinical precision, writing in the logbook, "The sea reclaimed its lost souls tonight." It was his attempt at rationalizing the irrational, perhaps. Or maybe he knew far more about this stretch of ocean than he ever told us. I, however, knew one thing with absolute certainty. Those spirits did not return to rest. They were not freed. They simply went back to waiting. Over the following days, the ship continued moving along its route, but nothing returned to normal. The atmosphere remained heavy, like a pressure weighing on our chests. The crew walked quietly, spoke minimally, and avoided the deck at night, unless absolutely necessary. Some refused night shifts altogether. Others claimed that whenever they stood near the railing, they felt someone standing behind them, breathing on their neck, touching their shoulder, whispering softly into their ear. One man resigned mid-mission, begging the captain to let him leave at the next supply point. He refused to explain why, but his eyes said enough. Terror had hollowed him out. Interviews conducted later revealed more unsettling details. One crewman admitted he had dreams where he was underwater, surrounded by faces too distorted to recognize but painfully familiar in their suffering. Another claimed he saw wet footprints in his cabin, at dawn, footprints that led to the bunk where he slept alone. Someone else swore that when he walked past one of the sealed storage rooms, he heard knocking from inside, but when the door was opened, nothing was there. No one wanted to say the word haunted, but everyone felt it. The Sea Guardian entered waters, rumored for decades to be stories, passed among sailors quietly, cautiously, as if speaking them too loudly might invite the same fate. Tales of shipwrecks no one found, distress calls with no coordinates, and ghostly vessels seen drifting with no crew aboard. Some dismissed them as maritime myths. Others, especially older sailors, said the ocean was full of wandering souls seeking release, revenge, or simply someone to drag down with them. The boundary between the living and the dead, they said, is thinnest over deep black waters where no sunlight reaches the bottom. The crew began researching past incidents. What they found was chilling. Decades earlier, a naval ship vanished in this same region. No wreckage was found. No bodies. Only fragments of its last transmission survived a garbled message about men in the water and shadows approaching the hull. The Sea Guardian sailed directly over where that ship had reported its last coordinates. Whether this was coincidence or fate, no one dared to guess. Some believed the spirits rising from the water were the lost sailors of that wreck, still trapped in the moment of their death, seeking salvation or companionship in their eternal misery. Others speculated that the sea itself or something within it had claimed them and was now reaching for more. The investigators later reviewing our logs and testimonies suggested the phenomenon matched no known natural or psychological events, but they also stopped short of labeling it supernatural. They preferred terms like collective hallucination and environmental stress, even though none of their explanations could account for the physical evidence: the footprints, the salt crust, the temperature drops, the malfunctioning instruments, or the recorded audio of footsteps when no one was on deck. One evening near the end of our return journey, a new anomaly occurred. The radar detected a massive object moving beneath the ship. It lingered for several minutes before descending too deep to track. Sonar captured a faint audio signature resembling human voices layered over one another, rising and falling like a chant. Experts later reviewed the recording and dismissed it as interference, but those of us on board knew what we heard. It was the same low murmur that some crew members claimed echoed through the corridors at night. The same murmur the captain described before sinking into silence. On the final night, before reaching port, I stood alone on the deck again, against every instinct telling me not to. The ocean stretched out endlessly under a sky wiped clean of stars. The surface reflected nothing but darkness. I stared into it for a long time, half expecting the faces to rise again. They didn't, but something else happened. I felt a hand on my shoulder, gentle, steady, unmistakably human. I turned around. No one was there, but on the deck behind me, there was a single wet footprint. It was facing toward the railing, toward me, when the Sea Guardian finally docked. The crew scattered faster than any team I'd seen in my years at sea. Some vowed never to sail again. Some transferred to land positions. One disappeared entirely, never answering calls or messages after leaving the port. The ship itself was inspected, cleaned, and reassigned for another mission months later. But the new crew reported strange malfunctions before even reaching open waters. A few claimed they saw someone standing on the deck during the night, someone not listed on the manifest. Eventually, the ship was quietly retired. Officials cited mechanical inefficiencies. The truth, however, circulated in whispers among those who served long enough to hear such things. The ocean keeps what it wants. The spirits we saw that night were not gone. They were simply waiting, watching, searching for the next ship, the next crew, the next lonely night over deep, forgotten waters Because the sea never frees a lost soul. It only lends it back for a moment before pulling it under again. If you enjoyed this true horror story, hit like and subscribe for more terrifying story. If your heart is still beating, you're not alone.